we are making a savory leftovers cake. It's a great way to use up condiments and cheese. It's delicious. I'm Zoë Kanan, and I am a pastry chef in New York City. Today, we are making a cake salé, or a savory cake. You want to use a combination of vegetables, maybe some sort of meat, or mushrooms, and cheese. If you don't have any cheese, I would wait until you do to make this. Part of the inspiration for this was, weirdly enough, this old pepper. This is a poblano, and this is gonna be where we're gonna derive a bunch of the flavor for our cake today. I'm gonna give it a char. So I'm gonna turn my heat all the way up and place it directly over the heat. I'm just gonna move it around over the flame. We're gonna hear that popping as the skin begins to char and sort of snap. As it chars, it starts to smell really good and is making me feel like I'm outside. I'm using chopsticks made of wood, which lights on fire, so I would recommend using tongs instead. I'm only gonna turn my back on that for 1 second, just enough time to roughly chop up these strips of bacon. And I'm gonna start prepping all of my different mix-ins and then collecting them in a bowl. My pepper is nicely charred. I'm going to steam it now in this plastic bag. We're just gonna let this sit and steam out for a little bit. Next, I am going to prep my Brussels sprouts. These are just leftover. I'm gonna cut them into 8s and toss them in with my bacon. These also already have some char, so that's gonna easily play into the flavors that we're going with our pepper. I'm gonna take my red cabbage. These are my windowsill scallions. I'm just relatively thinly slicing these and making sure I'm gonna leave that 1.5 inch left so I can regrill. Back in my water. We're gonna move into making the batter. This is probably the easiest cake batter I've ever made. There's no sugar in it. Okay, so I just grabbed my flour from my freezer. Flours, spices, I always recommend to keep those things in your freezer. I'm using about 180 grams. It's like 1.5 cups. Baking powder, I'm gonna use 8 grams, about 2 teaspoons. There's a decent amount of baking powder in it. That's because we have all of these mix-ins going in. We're gonna have all of the cheese. So those are heavy things, and the batter is gonna need a little extra leavening to help it rise in the oven. Salt, about 1/2 teaspoon. I'm always excited to use this green chili powder. It's not very spicy, but it adds this really beautiful, like, herbal quality. I am going to my little whisk and just blend this together. I'm making a little well in the center of my dries and pretty much devise this so that you can mix everything in the same bowl. So I have 4 eggs. I've had them sitting out at room temperature. That's just gonna keep the batter a little bit warmer, which is gonna help it bake faster in the oven. I'm just gonna whisk them. 1/2 cup of milk is going in. I had some leftover bacon drippings, so I need 1/4 cup of oil total. I'm gonna measure out these bacon drippings and then make up the difference with olive oil. There's so much flavor in bacon fat that it can be added to like the simplest, most humble ingredient and really make it more satisfying. This bomba is super fiery hot, so I'm gonna add a couple spoonfuls of that. If you were doing a more like classic version of this with olives and ham, instead of using bomba, I would recommend using the like heat from mustard. Just gonna combine it until it smoothens out. Use a whisk for this to get the lumps out. Once you've combined the dry ingredients and the liquids, you don't wanna overwork it because that's going to develop gluten in the recipe. My batter is made. I have this piece of white cheddar, which is what I'm gonna mostly use. I also have these weird nubs of cheeses. This is Parm and Gruyere. Parm rind is also something that you can save, and there's a lot of flavor still locked in there, and you can throw that into a stock. I'm not worried about getting perfect shreds. It's okay if little nubs get in there. My pepper has been steaming. I am now going to use the blade of my knife to scrape off the charred skin because it just gets this like plasticky texture once it's been cooked. We definitely don't want that. I grew up in Texas and my dad did a lot of our cooking, and he cooked almost everything outside on a grill. So having like charred flavor is something that's like comforting to me. I'm gonna cut it open, scrape out the seeds. I'm gonna slice out the spine of the pepper. Now I'm just gonna slice this into little strips. There's still some like freshness and bite to the pepper. It's like not completely cooked through. So it'll finish cooking in our cake. And now I'm just gonna roughly chop this. Then I have just a couple of these pickled jalapenos. Because the classic version of this has olives in it, like it's so rich from the cheese that something kind of briny is nice in here. Roughly chop these up. My mix-ins are complete, so I'm going to fold these in to my batter. You can use a spatula for this. I'm using a bowl scraper. I put a lot of mix-ins in this batter, definitely more than is typical. I'm gonna season it with some pepper and then taste the batter for salt. There's quite a lot of like natural salt in this from like the bacon and the cheese. I think we're good on the salt. All right, just folding in the pepper. Gonna prepare my loaf pan, and then I am lining it with parchment paper. And I want my sheet of parchment to be just under the length of my pan. And I'm going to use my nonstick spray to help adhere the paper to the sides to make it easier for me to remove the cake. Now I'm going to just scrape all of my batter in. Spread it evenly throughout the pan and wrap it on the counter a couple of times. I have my oven preheating to 350 and we will check on it in about 40 minutes. I like to bake it on the rack with a sheet tray on the shelf just below it so that it can catch anything that like happens to bubble out. The leftovers cake has been baking for about an hour now, and we're ready to take it out. Depending on what like mix-ins you have, a knife or cake tester might not come out clean, but in this case mine will. So we're good. We sliced it up while it's still piping hot. Let's try it. The interior tastes creamy and eggy, but still has like a nice bounce back from the cheese. Spicy, and I just put into a Brussels sprout, which made it a little bit more hearty. It's delicious. Try baking a savory leftovers cake. Enjoy.